Hello, BookTube. I've been feeling a little down in the dumps today. I had a guest over just recently, and as always happens with me, when a guest leaves, I get a little bit depressed. I, unless the guest is an incredible loser, I always want them to stay longer than they do. So I always irrationally, in a silly way, I'm always down in the dumps when they go. So I thought, rather than indulge that I should instead uh, do things intentionally to cheer myself up. And two of those things would be talking about books and talking to you. So I thought I'd make videos today where my original idea first thing this morning is that I would not. Uh, and of course, even if I'm down in the dumps, in fact, especially if I'm down in the dumps, I'm going to watch BookTube, even if I don't make videos. So I've watched a bunch of videos today, and I saw Bill Ruttenberg over at the Ruttenberg Library do a Monday morning reading report. Just an overview. We have all different kinds of names for this kind of video. Friday reads, weekend reading, just a catch up of all kinds. I love them. I love these kinds of videos. I always tell myself that I should do them more often. Uh, but I saw Bill's video and loved it, and then I thought, well, why not do one of those yourself? And in a more general sense, do one of those yourself. So I thought I would do that in this video just to get me back on camera and back talking. So I've got a bunch of stuff here to show you. Some are discrete, some are unexpected. There are also some reading projects that are ongoing in the background that I don't tend to talk about them on my channel. I've got three of those that I can talk about today. One is fairly recent. One was actually the result of a gift of one of you. One of you sent me the old Penguin Classic of the first volume of Karl Marx's Capital, and I've been deep in the weeds of this thing ever since. I've been ensconced with it, mainly because there's a new translation coming out in a couple of months. The first one since this. And I'm going to be ensconced with that translation for a long time. I figured I might as well really know the previous translation or know it as well as I can. So I've been involved in this, and originally I was rereading this just for a sense of the reading experience. I was mainly concerned with the reading experience because I don't have any illusions that I can really grasp Marx's economic thought. I don't have any illusions that people go to school for that sort of thing. So I was really interested in, when I say the reading experience, I really mean the translation experience. What is the nature of the translation? Not its accuracy, but its nature. What is it like as a reading experience? Under the assumption that most people who read Capital Volume 1 are only going to read it once, and that most people who read Capital Volume 1 are not going to read it in the original. So I started out thinking about that and concentrating on that, but of course you can't determine what part of a book is going to take over. And now I'm involved in Marx's thought, in just what he thinks of commerce, large-scale commerce, just in general. And it's fascinating. In a way, it's fascinating. So I'm taking my time with this. I'm absorbing it. So it's an ongoing project. And then another ongoing project for August is the oldest one of them all. Every summer, I reread Homer's Iliad in June, and I reread Homer's Odyssey in August. And I do it slowly, and I do it lovingly. I just absorb it. I know these things. I've read them so many times that I don't quite know how to describe what the experience is. I sometimes, usually I vary it up every year by changing the translation that I'm reading. Because in addition to being a huge fan of Homer, I'm also a huge fan of English language translations, of the endeavor of doing that. I'm fascinated by the endeavor of doing that. But July this summer was really hot. It wasn't anywhere near as hot as most of the rest of the country. We never hit triple digits, but it was really hot, and it was hot for a sustained amount of time, to the point where mornings were breathlessly hot and humid. Early morning, 5 in the morning, no relief at all. And that went on for day after day after day for pretty much the whole month of July. And it wore me out. It wore out my patience. Or maybe increased my homesickness or whatever it was that it did. The minute I was within striking distance of August 1st, I was thinking about the Odyssey. I knew right away that I wasn't going to read it in translation this year, which feels like a waste in a way because there's so many translations and there's so much of interest there. But I just stuck with that. So I don't, the Odyssey, I have even less to report than, I think I said on this channel nothing about the Iliad, but I have even less to report about the Odyssey this time around because I can't even talk to you about a translation that you can go to your Barnes & Noble and buy. Precious little there, although I am absolutely loving it. Odysseus is has washed up naked on the shore. Is being gawked at by a teenage girl. so the story is cooking right along. I am very much enjoying it, as always. But I'm not dealing with another person in the room this time around. I'll make it up. I'll make it up either next time or with some other translated work. I'm seriously thinking about doing that. It's late in the year for me to be making major decisions along these lines, but something I think I might very much like to do would be to add a couple of canonical works to that rotation. For the whole of my reading life, it's been the Iliad in June and the Odyssey in August, and nothing else. Nothing else that has that kind of rotation. And I'm thinking I might like to change that. I think I might like to add a couple of books. I think that I know what they are. I think that I want to do a springtime reading of the Divine Comedy and a winter reading of the Canterbury Tales every year. I'll just figure out how I want to do it and then just do it that way. And just add it, like the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is the first year I've really thought to do that. It's the Iliad and the Odyssey every year is just such a normal part of my reading life now that I haven't really thought about it much. But I like the idea, I doubt that'll happen this year. But along those lines, when I was thinking about that, I was naturally thinking about that when I read this. This is a little biography of Chaucer, a tiny 150 pages. I'm going to write a review of this. I enjoyed it, but that was a recent read. That was on my mind. But the Odyssey is another background project. So like Karl Marx, who is bid fair to take over a chunk of the background for quite some time, because I'm going to finish with this. And then I think, even though it's outside the brief of the volume coming out from Princeton in the autumn, I think I might find the other volumes of the Penguin Capital and read those as well. I read them, not the Penguin one, but I read the other parts of this book eons ago. High time I came at it again, especially since Volume 1 is fascinating me so much. I don't have those, Volume 2 and Volume 3. I think Penguin did 3 volumes of Capital, I think. At least they did 2. I don't have them, but the Brattle will provide. The Tumblers of Fate will certainly put them in my path. And that's before I read and reread the new translation. So I'm going to be dealing with Marx in the background for quite some time. But then another project in the background is Iris Murdoch. Again, another thing that I really don't talk about on this channel. I'm doing a systematic reread of Iris Murdoch. Which is different from me going back to a book here or a book there and rereading it just to satisfy my curiosity or scratch an itch. Every year I do a couple of systematic rereads, and that's a different thing. That means I am steeping myself in biographies. That means I'm steeping myself in letters. That means I'm reading lots and lots of published occasional prose, nonfiction. Did the person write book reviews? Did they write prefaces? Are any speeches collected? It means doing all of that all together, concertedly together, establishing in my mind a timeline, and then reading all the person's published work in order of publication, which I don't ordinarily otherwise ever do. But for a systematic reread, that's important. I want to read their works in publication order, in composition order, so that I can see how they're changing, if they're changing, so that I can spot common threads in a more systematic way as those threads develop, rather than hopscotching all over the place. And I'm doing that with Iris Murdoch. I did that originally. I laid that groundwork with Philip Larkin. Now I'm past that point with him. Now I'm just absorbing the poems. But with Iris Murdoch, I am plowing my way through the whole of her literary existence. And I'm up to Bruno's Dream. And I'm not blasting through these things. I'm taking my time with them. Bruno's Dream so far is easily my most favorite of the novels that I have read. I've read half a dozen of these things now, and it's everything that I had convinced myself Iris Murdoch in fiction never is. It's light. It's full of dialogue. I always thought that this writer never used dialogue if she could help it. I'm definitely seeing that's not always true. Some books, yes, but not this one. I'm learning a disconcerting amount about spiders. A lot about spiders that I don't want to know. But it's not only light, but it's often funny. It reads a lot like, well, I don't know. I'm sure that moldering somewhere in some university storage locker, there is a doctoral dissertation on the stylistic intersection between Iris Murdoch and Barbara Pym. I'm sure that exists, or even E.F. Benson. But this is not what I expected at all. I'm really, really enjoying it, and enjoying the project too. This is definitely going to reclaim Iris Murdoch for me, reclaim her, and also bump her in my esteem. I think this might be a genuinely, seriously good book, which, I mean, it's coming out that way. I'm not quite sure I remember how this ends. So and it doesn't matter anyway. It was long enough ago so that I'm all of my judgments will be new. But if I'm right, if this does what I think it's going to do, if it stays the way it's reading, then this will be the first genuinely, seriously good novel that I've read from this author in this systematic reread, which has a long time left to go. This is a prolific author, but I'm loving it, absolutely loving it. And those are the background projects. And then there's the Chaucer biography. I guess there are a couple of other background projects, but that's what this is. This isn't really, here are the last 5 books that I read. I'm really going with the spirit of Bill Ruttenberg's video, because Bill Ruttenberg has, I don't know if you watch his channel, but he always has like 6 or 7 or 10 books on the go. Different books for different moods, for different places, for different activities, different mind frames. He's a lot like Mark Richardson in that regard. Definitely not flighty at all. And there's also a card catalog going on. I've seen Mark do this, and I know that Bill's the same way. That even though you're only getting you're in the mood to go back to book X, Y, or Z at a certain point or at a certain time, you remember it. It's got a card catalog entry of its own. You're not losing anything by bouncing all around like that. It's not the way that I read, but it is definitely the way a lot of people read. And in his video, Bill mostly talks about that. Those books essentially are long-term projects. And that's what I'm kind of talking about here. There's not all of it, but some of it. Background projects are going to come up. Not so much for this one. I just got this the other day. This is a review copy, the date on it, of Dermot McCullough's biography of Thomas Cromwell. And this is great. It's an absolutely great biography. And I told myself when I got it, okay, but you're not going to reread the whole thing. I just reread the whole thing last year. So you're not going to reread the whole thing. And so far, I am holding true with that. It's difficult because I love to reread, and this is just great. I will get more out of it every time I read it. But I decided just to plunk in on one specific narrative event, the rise and the downfall of Anne Boleyn. And that's what I'm doing so far in this book. And it is, well, it's so good. It is absolutely so good. Dermot McCullough, of course, is, among other things, he is a historian of the Christian church. So he spends a good deal of time noting that both Anne Boleyn and Thomas Cromwell were church reformers. They had reformist ideals. They thought that the church had grown venal and corrupt. They were Erasmians. They thought exactly what Erasmus did. If you read his treatises at the time, zinging their way all over Europe, you can't not be convinced. He excoriates the church for its excesses, for its greed, for its hypocrisies, for its worldliness. And he does it. I know it's a lost cause to talk about Erasmus in 2024, and I promise I won't keep doing it, but he does it in brilliant prose. There's no way that I can convey it because it's never been translated to give it its due. But it's brilliant prose. Think about some of the best, most convincing public intellectual / firebrand or gadflies that you know of. I hate to say Christopher Hitchens, but pick a figure like that. That's what Erasmus was like to read. Electrifying. Scoring points on the church in a way that no one had done in 1,500 years. And it was totally convincing. And it convinced Anne Boleyn. And it convinced Thomas Cromwell. that what we need here is the new learning. What we need here is reform of church excesses. We have to stop having the worldly, stupid, gluttonous, drunken monks that Erasmus lampoons so hilariously. We have to stop having them. And Durbin McCullough, in the part that I'm reading now, is naturally he knows church history, so he stresses the fact that before these two were enemies, they were allies. But it was not to last. and at this particular point in the narrative, if you are Cromwell's enemy, you're in big trouble, because at this point in the narrative, he's not yet losing. So I'm reading right now. I'm in the sunny midday of Anne Boleyn, who would have carried all before her if she had been able to keep a promise that she made. But of course, you can't, unless you're Bene Gesserit, you can't tell someone, your husband, that you will give him a son. You can't do that, and she did repeatedly, and failed repeatedly to do that. So her own downfall. Henry could be weird and contradictory, and also very, very thin-skinned on the nature of church reform. It very nearly sent his last wife to the block, but it probably wouldn't have been that would have done in Anne Boleyn. He was totally besotted by her. If she had added to that besotment by giving him a son, well, who knows what the church in England might have been like. But as it is, I know what's coming, and it's a lot of fun. I am going to strongly resist the urge to just read the rest of the book. Once the blade falls on Anne, I'm going to try to let this thing go. Then I finished this. This was on the nightstand, literally on the nightstand. I have a nightstand right next to the old bed in the little book room, and it fills and then unfills with books, fills and then unfills with books. And this one's been on there. I've been picking at it. It's been utterly delightful, so I haven't wanted to just exhaust it. We saw it on this channel. I hauled it from the Brattle Bookshop a couple of months ago. It's this thing. It's the Saturday Evening Post's animal book. It's an editor went through and culled not all, but a lot of the animal writing from the Saturday Evening Post. You've got all this great artwork. Oh my God, the thing is entirely full of period artwork. Just wonderful stuff. Just wonderful. The artwork was as much of a draw for me as anything else. And this includes all the major stuff that they could find that was either originated or was reprinted in their pages about animals and the natural world. You've got an excerpt from Walden Pond. You've got The Bear by William Faulkner. A bunch of other stuff. At first, when I was reading the first few entries, because I read it from front to back. At first, I was thinking, okay, well, this anthology is 100 years old, and I think I know now what it's going to be like. And there's a reason why I am very, very picky about old animal anthologies, because most of them are about trapping, mutilating, and killing animals, and I don't want to read about that. I don't want to read about that. I know that it happened in massive numbers, and still does happen in numbers that are too big, but I don't have to read about it. And I was very happy that very shortly in this book, the variety of pieces increases, and suddenly it's not just all about killing and bear trapping and whatnot. It's not all about that anymore. Getting a little bit too much of bear cruelty for my liking anyway. So I was glad there wasn't much of it in this book. It was absolutely delightful. Such a find. The bear torturing is coming not only from background mentions here, because that bear baiting and dog fighting were incredibly popular sports in the Tudor era. It's how a lot of people pass their time. And if you don't know what bear baiting is, don't look it up. It is just manifestly cruel. That's all it is just cruelty. It's not even a contest. It's just cruelty. It's just bloodlust. And the reason, it's not just the background mentions here. I'm also rereading The Other Boleyn Girl by Philippa Gregory. And it's all over that. It's just everywhere in there. Also, like the Chaucer book, this little Chaucer biography is brand new. I also read just this morning, once my guest left and I was down in the dumps, I read a book about reading, which I was really hoping would cheer me up, and it kind of did. This is Reading Practice by Melissa Reynolds. I don't know exactly when this is coming out. This is This is an advanced copy, just the PDF of an advanced copy, and it was quite it was quite informative, quite interesting. Could have been, I think. I don't know. It's a little early to tell. On the two chapters I read the whole thing, but there were two chapters where I knew the subject really well, and on those two chapters seemed a little undersourced. And I don't know if that's true for the other chapters, but I'll give it a much more thorough going over when I get the actual print and paper book. But the subject is interesting because it's not about it's about one specific aspect of literacy in the Middle Ages and the late Middle Ages. It's about one specific aspect of that. As books became more affordable, more commonplace, easier to produce in larger numbers, there started to be book fairs, book stalls. There started to be readers among the populace. Books are still expensive. Books have always been too expensive, but all of a sudden they weren't the province just of the clergy or the nobility. And this author points out that led to a flourishing market in how-to manuals. That's basically what this book is about. It's about where did people go for information at this time. If they were going to go for information somewhere, just cold, instead of either living in ignorance or going to grandma by the fireside, if they wanted information on something, where did they go to get it? It sounds like such a simple question, but if you're an up-and-coming burger in, I don't know, Midlands English town, and you've got sheep, and you've got a wheel that's powered by water, and you're making money, and you're doing commerce, and let's say, pick any number of things. Let's say you're doing all of that. You're a friend to your neighborhood. You help your relations. You are smiling and happy. Why shouldn't you be? Things are going well. When suddenly, over the course of a few weeks, you develop a wen, W-E-N, a growth right here. It's too high up on your neck for any kind of neck covering to hide completely, so people can see it. But more importantly, you're wondering what it is. It's getting bigger and bigger. First, it starts out as a little pea. Then, when it's the size of a grape sticking out of your neck, you want to know what it is and maybe what you can do about it. And the only person within 50 miles that even has a pretense of any kind of medical knowledge is the blacksmith. You don't trust him. Maybe you don't like him. Maybe you found him drunk at his anvil one too many times. What do you do in that circumstance? You have money. You might buy a book. You might buy a book. Maybe in the cathedral town down the road, maybe there's a selection of books, and maybe one of them is a medical manual. Well, as the author points out in this book, you don't have Google. You don't have YouTube. What did people do? If you have a wen on your neck, what do you do? If you're that same guy and your health is just fine, but you want to build a curing shed on your property, you don't have the first idea how to do it. You just know that you'd like sweetmeats during the winter. You'd like preserved food. You have the environment for it, the shade, the water, whatnot, the power. You just don't know how to do it. You have no idea how to do it. No one that you know knows anything about that. Well, you might want to buy a book. You might want to get a book on the subject or any other subject. And that's really what this is about. It's about what were those books and how did people learn about them and where did they find them and what did they pay for them and how did they use them? I knew already of this subject that those books tended to be treasured and passed on from generation to generation, especially the medical manuals, especially if the medical manuals had success. So that's mainly what this is about. And I found it very good. I enjoyed it. What else have we got here? I'm just burning through my recent reading in the same way that Bill Ruttenberg did, my hero. Okay. The last one we can do here is one new book. It's not out yet in this country, and also one other ongoing project. Because the new book is this. It's The Letters of Seamus Heaney, which I am living with. I am pouring through. I am... with letter collections, I really want to get the tone. I want to separate out the ones that were written in haste for no reason with no real investment. So a dashed off letter to the editor, a courteous response to a publisher, versus the ones that are longer and meant to be good, meant to be artful. I'm getting a feel for all of that. I'm getting a feel for Seamus Heaney's voice in this kind of writing as opposed to the other kinds of writing that I know him for, the public kinds of writing that I know him for. And I'm doing all that preparatory to really going through this again from front to back, pencil in hand, when I get the finished copy. I'm gonna love and live in the finished copy, and that's the new thing. And it's connected to another ongoing project, one that isn't really a project. I just haven't been able to let go of it. I don't have it with me here. I have a copy of the collected letters of John McGarren, the novelist, and I have been just, oh my God, I have been living in that volume. I either need to get an e-copy of that book, or I need to get another copy of that book, because mine is ready to fall apart. And that I wasn't even thinking of who does this for our Stars and Giroux. I wasn't even remembering that they were going to bring this out in the U.S. When I was doing that. So those two things are dovetailing with each other in ways that I didn't expect. I wasn't prepared for it. So, but good, in a good way, because now I'm hip deep in 2 letter collections of Irish intellectuals. So there you go. I think I've got a mess all around me, but I think that's all. That's good, isn't it? That's a bit of a Monday reading report. Not a little bit. It's a little bit light on all the new releases that I'm reading. Just a handful of new releases here, and instead more of a state of affairs here, state of the union for reading. So I don't know if this was any interest, but it definitely cheered me up. So I'll wrap this up for now. This is just a Monday reading report, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.